Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to go through how I utilize order flow through Bookmap in order to create my trading plan, time my entries, and know exactly where to enter and exit a position. Mastering order flow and options trading will really change how you read price action and can really bring a lot of consistency into your trading long term. By utilizing Bookmap's order flow, you can identify when there's strength behind a move, and potentially before the move actually happens, you can identify when it's going to break a significant level to the upside or downside. Utilizing order flow and Bookmap has really helped me build a lot more confidence in my trading plan, in my entries, and especially in my exits as well. In today's video, I'm going to show you exactly the signals I look for on Bookmap on the 2-minute and 5-minute time frames in order to time my entries. If you've never heard of Bookmap, the simplest way to think about it is Bookmap shows you what's beneath the chart and who's actually buying and selling and where. It's like turning the lights on in a dark room. I use Bookmap with futures, ES, and the NASDAQ to trade SPY, QQQ, and SPX. SPX does not have volume, so you will not be able to see order flow. So that's why I utilize futures, Bookmap, especially ES and the NASDAQ, in order to identify when there's going to be potential buyers stepping in or sellers stepping in, potential levels of support and resistance where there's aggressive buyers or sellers sitting, waiting to fill their orders, in order for me to plan out exactly where I'm going to enter and exactly where I'm going to exit my profit targets on the trades that I take. So now I want to go through an example of a trade that I took and what I saw in Bookmap and ES and in the price action of SPX in order to identify exactly where to enter the position and where to exit the position. Okay, so this is a trade that I took on May 19th, and I traded SPX calls to the upside, and I was looking for the gap fill basically. So SPX gapped down from 59.58 all the way down to around 59.03. So I was watching SPX for the gap fill above the 59.03 into 59.08. Now my entry on this play was going to be above 59.10 because whenever SPX gaps down or gaps up, I always look for the next significant level of support or resistance for my entry. I don't enter exactly at the gap fill. I wait for it to break the next level of resistance, in this case the upside, for me to look for entry. That's a more significant level because it has touched multiple times instead of just the post gap level that it just created today. So I'm going to look for the break of 59.10 to the upside for calls on SPX. Now, if we go ahead and look at ES futures, you can see that after hours, and this was Monday morning. Over the weekend, ES was in a downtrend overall, and you can see that it's holding this downtrend. And right here, it creates an upwards trend. Here you can see 1, 2, 3 touch, and it breaks that downwards trend to the upside. So I'm on West Coast time, so you'll see West Coast time zones or Pacific time zones. So you can see right before open at 6:15, ES retested that trend line. It broke the downwards trend line and then also retested this upwards trend line. So you can see that it retested and held. So what I'm looking for ES at open is for it to break 59.20 as it held this trend line here to complete the breakout of the downwards trend line, which signifies if you get a breakout of the downwards trend line here, the swing high on this trend line is sitting at around 59.75. So for that day, ES's target would be 59.75, or just specifically for this trend line break. Now that target can hit at any point, but ES does move when it is a trending day in about 50 to 100 point increments. So the 75 points wasn't too big of a move on ES if we were to get a trending day overall in the market. Another thing that I wanted to see as well is ES to clear its VWAP level and its EMAs, and you can see right at open we got the cross. Now let's go ahead and look at Bookmap and see exactly what I was looking at Bookmap in order to help identify when to enter and when to exit. So my entry on SPX was going to be above 59.10, with every 10 points being a target, with the final target being 59.50 because that is a psychological level. I had my final target before the end of the gap fill because 59.50, any 50 to 100 point increments is usually a psychological level on SPX, which means that usually people take profit around that level. So I was comfortable keeping 59.50 as my final profit target on SPX if I were to get the entire gap fill. If you go ahead and look at ES futures on Bookmap, you can see that ES had some sellers sitting at 59.25 and 59.30. So my main issue here was before I were to enter SPX calls, I would want to see ES futures clear 59.25. So you can see that it filled those orders. As you can see, when it does fill the orders here, this bubble fills the order block at 59.25. We didn't get aggressive buying pressure coming in. We started to see some buyers, but then sellers ended up taking back over and the stock pulled back. So it wasn't able to really hold above that 59.25 level. Usually when that happens and I see that the next 5 points on ES is also a level of resistance on Bookmap, I will wait for that 5 points to clear. So for example, here 59.30 also had some sellers sitting at this level. So I wanted to see 59.30 clear with the continuation and the follow through of buying pressure before I entered SPX calls. And you can see here that once it pulled back at 59.25, approached the 59.30 level here, you can see pulled back, wasn't able to clear 59.30. And then right here, we get a big buy order come in, fill the orders at 59.30, and then you don't get a lot of selling pressure. So see the difference between this move right here and this move over here? You can see that when we got the fill at 59.25, heavy sellers stepped right back in and pulled the stock back down. Versus if you see this breakout over here, filled the 59.30 level, we don't see heavy aggressive selling pressure coming in as it pulls back. Really low buying and selling pressure here overall, a little bit of indecision, but buyers step back in at 59.30, and that is when we get the aggressive push up. And you can see aggressive buyers stepping in, and there's no sellers from the 59.30 fill all the way to the next level of 59.35 and then 59.40. And even over here when we see, so whenever a stock breaks out of a level, usually it tends to pull back and retest that level, especially if it's a significant level of support and resistance. That works extremely similarly to Bookmap. Okay, Bookmap works extremely similarly to how price action moves on the chart. So if we look here, the level of resistance on Bookmap was 59.30 on ES futures. It broke out at 59.30. The next level up was about 59.35, 59.40. You can see that once it gets into 59.35, look what happens. It pulls back. Where does it pull back to? To that 59.30 level, okay? Pulls back to 59.30 here. Aggressive sellers are not coming in at that 59.30 level. What happens? We end up bouncing again and continue the move up. Now let's go ahead and look at the chart here. So this was all around 6:40. So I entered SPX calls at 6:40, 9:40 Eastern time. So this was exactly what happened at 9:40 on ES futures. So this is the time here. You can see that once I saw aggressive sellers stepping in here after it cleared the 59.30 level and the orders here, you saw aggressive buyers stepping in, no aggressive sellers versus this section over here in Bookmap. And that is when I decided to enter SPX calls at 9:40 once it ended up clearing on ES futures and we got heavy buying pressure coming in. If we go ahead and look at the chart on ES futures, you can see this is your 9:40 candle opened and held above 59.30, above its EMAs, above its VWAP, cleared the 59.20 pre-market level here at 59.20, cleared the 59.30 level, and I entered SPX calls here at 9:40 once it ended up holding above the 59.10 level. I waited for a lot of confirmation here. I waited for ES to clear 59.30 on Bookmap, and I waited for a confirmation candle on SPX calls above 59.10, and you can see we got the nice push up. I scaled out of SPX at 9:48. 10:02 here on this candle once it cleared 59.30, and then 10:17 on this candle here once it pushed into 59.50. I was comfortable exiting. I don't usually necessarily wait specifically for it to touch that level. Sometimes when I'm in a position, I'll wait for the push because you always want to get out on the push up. The push up of the premium is going to help you get out at the premium spike. So if you wait for the candle to close or if you wait for the next candle to open, sometimes that premium pulls back. And on a 0 DTE contract, when it does pull back, you can give a lot of profit back. So I always recommend to students to exit on or scale out on the push up. And for this specific play, I exited at an 80-10-10 split. So 80% at my first profit target and then 10 and 10 at my final profit targets once it pushed into 59.50. So this is where I entered here on SPX. Once ES cleared 59.30, okay, so around this level is where I entered SPX. And if we go ahead and look, you can see that ES pushed directly into this 59.50, 45 level C where it has some sellers. So above 59.30, which is where I entered here, okay, you can see the next level up here is 59.40, 59.45, and then we had a few at 59.50, but nothing too significant or heavy, but then 59.55 and 59.60 were some heavy selling pressure, and then 59.65 and 70. So those were the main levels on Bookmap to the upside. And you can see this is the current order book to the side. If we zoom in here, you can see 59.70 had a very strong level So if you look at the current order book on the right side, you can see that 59.70 and 59.75 had aggressive sellers sitting at those levels. And remember what I said in the beginning, the swing high out of the trend line break on ES futures was 59.75. So you can see clearly even on Bookmap that 59.75 has a wall. It wasn't even able to get into that. It was failed. Right around here, we started to see buying pressure slow down. You can see the order sizes on this push versus the order sizes on this push. And when we pulled back here, again, look at this. When we pulled back, it was to 59.50, where the buyers broke out, pulled back to around 59.50, and then you can see buyers step back in, sellers were not in control, but it did slow down. You can see the difference between the order sizes here and then the order sizes here, and we ended up slowing down. And you can see around, this is 7.17, so 10.17 is where I exited my final runners on SPX once ES's buying pressure started to slow down. So if we go ahead and look, so 648, I scaled out because we had a wall at 59.45, my first scale out. The second scale out was at 10.02. You can see the push up here. I could have held that 10.02 a little bit longer to around 10.10, but I ended up scaling out because again, 59.50 is a psychological level on ES, so I anticipated some sellers stepping in, but we didn't really get aggressive selling pressure stepping in until around 59.60, and then we got the aggressive selling pressure stepping in. And then you can see here, once it slowed down, going into 59.65, you can see that there's not a lot of aggressive buyers stepping in. I decided to exit on the push up into 59.50 on SPX. You can see here, this is the 7.17, 10.17 candle. This is the 9.48 candle here, and this is the 10.02 candle. If we go ahead and look at ES futures, this is the 10.17 candle here, 5-minute candle. You can see that we got a little bit of a pullback on the candle before that, but we ended up holding the 59.55 and the 9 EMA. But right here, I started to see that buying pressure slowed down, wasn't comfortable with what I was seeing on Bookmap, so I ended up exiting the rest of my position on SPX. And if we zoom completely out of Bookmap here, you can see that once we did get the 59.30 break right at open, really, we had the buyers continuously hold until right around here. We had some selling pressure coming in, but nothing too aggressive, a little bit of a consolidation before, again, buyers took over, a huge push up, got a little bit of a pullback, and that is when we started to see some choppiness in ES for the next, I think, hour or two in the market before it started to continue up again. So this is exactly how I utilize Bookmap. I look at the order size, I look at the volume pressure indicator, which some of you have seen me utilize on Instagram to look at aggressive buyers and aggressive sellers. I look at the levels when I enter to the upside or downside to see where there's aggressive sellers sitting or aggressive buyers sitting, depending on which side of the market I'm on. And you can utilize this with any ticker that you trade. If you're trading futures, if you're trading Tesla, if you're trading SPY, QQQ, the only ticker that you won't be able to see Bookmap is SPX because it doesn't have volume, so you're not going to see order flow with SPX. So that's why I utilize SPY and ES's, mostly ES and NASDAQ's Bookmap in order to identify where there's going to be levels where I could potentially enter and exit on SPX and how to properly set my profit targets. Bookmap has been a really big game changer with my exits. So I've really been able to catch more of the move by watching Bookmap and not getting shaken out of those 1 or 2 minute candles where they pull back. You're in a 0 DTE contract or 1 DTE contract and the contract drops in value. But if you look at Bookmap, you can see that buyers are still in control overall. There's no reason for you to exit. So it's really a game changer for people that tend to get shaken out of positions or tend to hesitate with entry. It can really help you find confidence in your entries, find confidence in holding the position to your profit targets as well. Bookmap has really helped me stay patient, avoid bad entries, avoid fake outs, have conviction in the trades that I take, and is really, like I said, a game changer, especially if you're scalping in the market, even day trading in the market, but specifically scalping and you watch order flow. It really is important to pay attention to where there's buyers, where there's sellers, if they're aggressive, if they're not. It can really help you avoid bad trades and be able to capitalize on more of a move when you're in a trade.